Welcome to The Last Track, where we help people showcase the last track of their life story in their final wishes. I am your host, Brian Norris, the co-owner of Bateman Funeral Home in Newport, Oregon. Just like a song can bring you back to a day, a time, and a memory, so too can a well-planned service. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about people who maybe haven't had the chance or haven't taken the opportunity to discuss their final arrangements with their family. And could be possibly that you're in your 40s and dying is the last thing on your mind. But then what happens is when people take seriously ill or there's a sudden death, some of the challenges are that the families then need to try to make that decision for you. And that can be really difficult. I can tell you, having met with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families now, that those families that have done a pre-arrangement or have talked with their family members before they become seriously ill, it's so much easier because then you don't have people sitting there going, what did mom want? Did she want burial or cremation? And then you don't have the split family going, I'm pretty sure mom wanted burial. Well, but wait a minute, cremation. I think she said cremation. Or even worse is when they get to the point of now the finances will be dictating the final arrangements. Maybe mom wanted to be buried, but the money's not there. And so having those conversations in advance really helps to make those decisions, those final arrangements, a lot easier. So let's talk about how we do that. There's different things out there. We have a booklet. It's free. People make an appointment and come in and pick these booklets up. And in the booklet, it talks a lot about different things. It talks about burial. It talks about cremation. It talks about property, cemetery property, that kind of stuff. And then one of the best parts of the book is right in the middle. You can go in and you can write in information of where your important items are and your wishes and maybe songs or what you want to have done at a memorial service, that kind of thing. There's also things that you can go online. You can go to a website of that funeral home. I know at our funeral homes that we have, you can go online, you can fill out a pre-arrangement information. You don't have to fund it. You can just say, keep this on record. And then we have that option where you can just keep it on record and you can put it in a folder so that if somebody does pass away, we have that information on file. You can go to Amazon. Amazon has lots of books out there on, there's one book that actually comes to mind. It's like, I'm dead now. What do I do? Those kinds of things where you can have all of your information placed in these books. But let's talk about when is a good time to have those conversations. It's better to have that conversation. Maybe you're out to dinner and you've just renewed your estate planning and you're talking to your children about those things. It helps with peace of mind so that the kids, the grandkids aren't making those decisions for you and they can have that peace of mind. It helps financially because you're already having those conversations and you're talking about having money set aside for a service, life insurance policies. Where do you find that? Pre-arranging at a funeral home where you've paid in advance and you've let the kids know or the grandkids know where that information is. It helps to be able to maybe do it in chunks and parts and pieces. So you can have the conversation and then you can talk about the financial part. And then you can save the money and talk about purchasing that life insurance policy, going to the funeral home and doing a pre-arrangement. You can do it in parts and pieces and it doesn't all have to be done at one time. It also gives you a chance to shop. When I get a call at 2:00 in the morning and somebody's saying, how much does this cost? and they're shopping around. And they have to make their decision based on what's the least expensive. That's a really hard position to be in. 2 a.m, dad's now passed away, son or daughter is calling because mom can't make the phone calls and there's not a lot of money, hasn't been any planning, and they're going, how much does this cost? Okay, let me call another funeral home. And it depends. I mean, if you're in a metropolitan area, you might have, 10, 15 funeral homes in the area. When you're out in a rural area like we are the only funeral home, and there's not a whole lot of other options. We started to talk a little bit about natural openings, that kind of thing. If you have an appointment at a doctor's and you come back and the children say, hey, how'd your doctor appointment go? You can say, yeah, it was good, but we need to have a conversation. That's a good time to do that. When you're planning for retirement, let's say maybe you're looking at 62 to 65 years old and you're getting ready to retire, and one of the things you want to put into place is your final arrangements, because you're getting closer to that age, and the last thing you want to do is have a unexpected expense that can be anywhere from $1,500 to $15,000, and not having planned for that. Making an advance directive. If you're doing an advance directive and you filled it out, there's no reason that you can't make a copy and give those to the people that will be doing your final arrangements for you, so they know. Do they want to be revived? DNR, heroics, those types of things, and what are your final wishes? The first thing that kind of is maybe kind of logical when it comes to mind is, as you're doing maybe your taxes and you're looking at life insurance and that kind of a thing, if you're setting up a life insurance policy and you're checking to make sure it's up to date, because honestly, just because you buy a life insurance policy when you're 25 doesn't mean that is what you need when you're 45. And so you should be looking at that, every so often to make sure you're up to date. Take a look at a life insurance policy, talk to your agent that you're working with, make sure that you're covered, and make sure that you're covered for your final expenses as well. And there are different riders, there's different things that you can add on. There's actually final expense life insurance just strictly for that as well, that you could look at and maybe have life insurance for your loved ones, and then one for your final expenses. That's something to take a look at doing. If you're starting or you're writing a will or you're doing a trust, that's a great time as well to be able to write out your final wishes that you want. Again, you're trying to get down on paper, something that talks about burial or cremation. There's also other options available now in Oregon and Washington. There's natural composition, decomposition. There's alkaline hydrolysis. There's lots of different things out there today. So take a look at your options. Maybe make a decision with yourself and then share that with your family. If you're updating your estate plan, that's another thing to do. You can update your estate plan, talk about what you want to do with your estate, as well as put in there what your final wishes are. If you're traveling, now the funeral home owner previous actually passed away while he was on vacation. And, we all have this idea of when we think we're going to die and how we're going to die and where we're going to die. I can promise you we don't know. You just don't know. Maybe 50% of the time, it's exactly how you think. Everybody thinks that, the man's going to go first and then the woman and that type of a thing. It doesn't happen that way. So if you're traveling, that's really important to make sure you're covered. If you decided you want a burial or cremation, there are travel protection plans out there as well, that while you're traveling, talk to your local funeral home. While you're traveling, it covers a cremation and getting you shipped back, or if you're going to be doing burial, it covers you getting embalmed and shipped back. Some of that stuff can cost tens of thousands of dollars. We've had somebody shipped back from Spain before, and I'll tell you, that's pretty expensive. And so if you have coverage for that, that's something that you can take a look at. Another thing, and we've talked about this before, but most of the funeral homes out there will have some sort of a planning guide. We have one as well, and in the planning guide, you can go in and fill out your information that you want, where your certain pieces of paper are, the important paperwork is, what your final wishes are, maybe even have who you want to have speak, whatever your wishes are. If you want to be scattered at a certain creek somewhere, write it down. But if you go to your local funeral home, like we have one, you can make an appointment, come in and pick one up from a funeral director and write your final wishes down somewhere. There's a conversation project kit that you can pick up that as you're going through this conversation kit, it will help lead you into the next questions. There's also estate planning books, all kinds of stuff out there. The challenge is just making the time and getting the tools to be able to get that written down somewhere. One last thought and idea is a lot of the funeral homes, ours included, you can go to the website, and on the website there's a pre-arrangement that you can fill out and have all of the information, your vital information, what you want to have done. You can fund it or you can do it unfunded. And in our funeral homes, we will print those out and place it into a folder, into a file. So if and when the day comes that that person passes and the family calls and says, hey, what did Uncle Bob want? We can pull out Uncle Bob's folder, open it up, and it has all of the final wishes right there. It helps take away that uncertainty and that frustration and a lot of anxiety of what did mom want, as you're having that conversation. So one of the very first things that you want to do is, as you're deciding who you should talk to and what your final wishes are, is coming up with who you want to have handle your final arrangements. Now, in Oregon and in most of the states in the United States, there's going to be some laws and statutes that talk about who is a legal next of kin. So if you've maybe said, I want John, or I want my oldest daughter, or that type of thing to take care of your final arrangements, and you haven't written them down and specified legally, that can be a challenge. So in Oregon, in ORS 97.130, I've said that so many times you'd think I could, 97.130, it's very clear who a legal next of kin is. Let's talk about that for a second. If you are married, your spouse who is living is your legal next of kin, period. Doesn't matter if you've had 3 or 4 or you're on your 5th spouse, the current one that you're with is your legal next of kin, period. This can happen and be a challenge in families that have maybe blended families, where you have a second mom or a second dad or a third mom or dad, and you have children from a previous marriage, and maybe the oldest or the 2 or 3 children from that previous marriage say, my dad just died, we're in charge, because they don't like the spouse. Doesn't matter. That spouse is the legal next of kin, period. Now, if you want to change that, because maybe you don't want your spouse to have to take care of the final arrangements, maybe it's going to be really difficult on that person. Well, you can designate, you can appoint another, and that could be anybody. It could be outside the family unit. It could be your best friend down the street. You can designate, you can leapfrog. So you don't want your spouse, you don't want your children, but maybe you have a grandchild that you want to make sure they take care of your final arrangements. Well, you appoint that person. You have a witness, there's some language that needs to be done, and you can find that if you were to go to ORS 97.130. We also have a copy on our website if you wanted to pull that off and use that. But the very first thing is who. Who do you want to have handle your final arrangements, and then get your information into that person's hands. It really helps. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in an arrangement. You've got 3 or 4 children. in an arrangement and they're fighting because mom didn't want that. Well, we don't have enough money to do that. And then they're arguing. It gets really simple. And I basically look at the people and say, designate, and I'm walking out. When I come in, I'm only going to talk to one person. Because I've been in a situation where there's 7 people talking to me at the same time, telling me different things. You don't want to have that happen in your family. So anyway, let's do that. Second thing that you want to have written down is your preferences between burial, cremation. People ask me, what's more expensive? I always tell them the most expensive urn that you can possibly find is less expensive than your cheapest, least expensive casket. And that's just the beginning. And I'm not trying to tell you one way or the other. That's just the simple, cold, hard facts is cremation is much less expensive than burial. There's other options. There's alkaline hydrolysis. It's newer. It's not everywhere in the U.S. It may not be an option near you, but that is available. There's another thing that's called natural decomposition. Oregon and Washington just passed those laws, and that's essentially you can be placed into a pod and you become composition that can be used as fertilizer, essentially. That's really not much further than green burial, and so there's different things within each final disposition that you can have those conversations and get it written down, because you can be buried and you can have green burial. You just got to make sure in your area that that's available. So get that written down. It really helps with peace of mind, especially for the people that are going to be doing the final arrangements at the end. You can have it written down. You can put it in a planning guide. Most funeral homes have a planning guide. And you can make an appointment, go in, pick one up. Usually it goes through and it talks about all the different options and different things available, that type of thing. And then somewhere in here, there's going to also be a place for you to write down your final wishes. And you can get it written down, and it should help make sure somebody knows where it's at. Because if you can write it all down, but if you don't give it to somebody or if you don't tell them where it's at, it's as if you've never written it down. So make sure you tell somebody. You might have some religious, spiritual beliefs or traditions or rituals that you want to have taken care of. Make sure you jot that down. There's different fraternities and clubs that you belong to. Some of those have their own rituals as well. The Elks, the Masons, those types of things. Were you in the military? Was that important to you? I can tell you as well, I've sat in arrangements where maybe dad or mom was in the military, and then they have to have that conversation of, do we want to get a flag? Do we want to have military honors? Do we want to go to a national cemetery? Where is a national cemetery? If it was important to you and you want to have that recognition of your service, make sure you jot that down and put a copy of your discharge paperwork, DD 214, honorable discharge, whatever is needed, in with your packet so that it's easy to find. And then the person that's in charge of those final arrangements knows that you want to have those military honors or your fraternal rituals or religious rituals. A couple more things. And that can be done in your arrangement books, that type of a thing. Vital information. And most of the states are the same, but sometimes it can be difficult for a grandchild, if they're doing the arrangements, to know what your mom's maiden name was. Because now that grandchild is trying to remember what great grandma's maiden name was. And not very many people know those when you're talking to them, just right offhand. They have them. They know where to find them, but maybe they don't know what great grandma's maiden name was. Because you're going to want to have where you were born, what city and state. You're going to want to know if you were in the military or not. You're going to want to know an occupation. Today's world, we've done 4 or 5 different occupations, and usually you can only list one. And so if you have one that you want to make sure is listed, get that put down. What describes you the best. A couple other things. After cremation, what do you want to have done? Because you can be put into a plot, you can be put into a niche, you can be scattered, you could be made into glass floats. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. If you have a strong feeling one way or the other, let them know. I might want to have my ashes, or at least part of them, scattered out at Big Creek Reservoir. Maybe you have a place that you fished or you hunted, or you love to go with quad runners, that type of thing. List that out so that they know what you would like. Every podcast we take a moment, and we take a moment to remember all the families that are experiencing a loss and to light a virtual candle in their memory. So let's take a moment and remember them. This has been The Last Track. If you like it, please make sure you like it. Please make sure you share it with somebody if you think that they can benefit from this conversation. If you want more information, you can go to our website at batemanpacificview.com. If you want to send us a message, you can go to info@batemanpacificview.com, send us an email. You can go onto the website and you can ask for more information, or you can just peruse the website and see the more information that we have. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.